Hey YouTube, this took me a while to figure out how to bleed the brakes on a 2015 Can Am Outlander 1000. The brakes are synced or integrated, meaning if you use the handbrake lever up there, that handbrake activates both front calipers and the one rear caliper. If you press the brake pedal, the foot brake, that only activates the rear. So that's what they call synced brakes, which makes it quite tricky to bleed them. So the technique I used is I used this Mityvac, which actually worked really good. Just pump it up. There's all different tips. For the most part, I was able to use this attachment right there and right over the bleeder valve nipple, and that worked pretty well. The Y splitter balancing valve was very hard to access, so I used this special tip, and that worked well. The main trick with using this Mityvac is you have to use Teflon tape to wrap around the bleeding nipples, otherwise you're just going to get air bubbles through the threads. Once you use Teflon tape, this thing works phenomenal. It'll hold 25 psi for, I don't know, I probably had it sitting for 5 minutes while drawing fluid without pumping it. So that's the key. If you use this, you have to take out the nipples, wrap them in Teflon tape, and you'll be good to go. So I started with the back. It's hard to look at the camera in my hand here. I started with this nipple. That got, pulled a lot of fluid. That primarily pulls fluid from right here, this reservoir underneath the seat. Then I made it to the rear master cylinder, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. Kind of right where my finger's pointing, there's another one of those bleeder nipples. You're going to want to crack that, and that'll pull its fluid from the front master cylinder, right there. And then the tricky part is this balancing or sequencing valve, which is difficult to see, but let me get some light in here. So there's that. You can barely see. Oops. So here's a brake line hose. This is a coolant hose. And there's another bleeding nipple on this sequencing valve. There you can see the top of the rubber nipple cap up there. You're going to want to bleed that. I believe that pulls fluid from both cylinders, or both reservoirs. And then there's the last two traditional bleeding valves on your front caliper there. So once you do all those, hopefully you'll get all the air out of the system. Again, I couldn't even get a hard pedal at all until I used that Mityvac vacuum bleeder. That seemed to save the day. There's the old caliper that wore through. I was always wondering why everyone says you go through rear brake pads so much quicker. Well, even though you don't use the rear brakes, well, you use the rear brakes because they're activated by the handbrake as well on the front. The cap said use DOT4 fluid, so that's what I did. And here's some of the old fluid that came out. Looks pretty terrible. And some of the newer fluid that got pulled through, not quite as bad. So yeah, it's not that hard a job once you got the right tool. The key is that vacuum bleeder saved the day. So good luck. Hope this helps somebody.